global warming, how can you understand what that means? Sounds difficult. In our classrooms, there are no boards, no chairs, and no tables. So my job is to create games with children and understand how can we protect nature and environment. When a child decides to be the hero of Grandmother Earth, he spent all the weekends of 1 year learning about water, biodiversity, planting, and then he gets accreditation like an environmental instructor. Because I feel that children are the best teachers in the world. I feel that I'm not working. I feel that I'm just doing what I really love. What I really want to do is to give a support for that children who are going to be the future, but they need to take action now. Imagine that you are a child.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will get started in about 2 minutes. We're just playing a video as more classes are joining. We're expecting a very large group today. So far, I have over 100 classes joining us, and the number is continuing to rise. I see that some of you are raising your hands in the chat. If you'll just type your questions in the chat box, because we are joining from Zoom webinars, so we're unable to come off mic, off of mute, and we're unable to show our faces due to the large number that we're expecting today. So please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will make sure that I get to all questions throughout today's session. So we will start in about 1 minute. Hello, Allison. So glad to have your class joining us again for our new Project Exploration 3.0. So it's great to see familiar faces. And as you're joining, if you could just please type in the chat where you're joining us from today. I know that we have schools from all around the world, so I'm so excited to have everyone here today. So welcome back, everyone. Wonderful. Abu Dhabi, so close to me. Hi, Amanda. Very great. Wonderful, everyone. Okay, so our numbers are continuing to rise. I'm gonna wait about 30 more seconds and then we're gonna get started because we have a jam-packed and fun-filled session for students today. Good to see everyone. Okay, well, students are still joining, but I just want to say good afternoon and greetings to students from all over the world and to the teachers that are also joining us today. I'm so excited to join you for today's session, and it's great to see so many familiar faces that have joined us from previous Project Exploration, and to the new classes that are joining us. I'm DaVida Alston, and I will be your teacher for today's lesson. And I will also be joined by a very special guest throughout the middle of our session today. And I'm thrilled to see so many students from different countries around the world continue to let us know where you're from, especially as our topic today is about global citizenship. So I work at National Geographic Learning, students. And one of the things that we believe is very important is that we feel it's our responsibility to help students to be aware of their future role as caretakers. And when I say caretakers, is that we want to make sure that you have the skills, that you're ready when you become adults, that you're able to take care of our planet and also able to take care of each other. And we want to make sure that students around the world are aware of how to make our planet fairer, how to make our planet safer, and how to make our planet environmental friendly. And in able to do that, we have to understand some of the global issues that are impacting our planet. And that's what we're going to learn about today. So students, please put on your listening skills. Please make sure that you're listening and you're tuning in for today's session. And I just want to make sure that everyone just has a few things to make sure that you're aware of. All students, because we have such a large group, I think I now have over 230 classes joining me, and then some classes joining from YouTube. We're on a Zoom webinar, and what that means is that students, all of your mics, all of your cameras have been turned off. But we want you to use your chat feature. If you're in your classroom, ask your teacher to type any questions that you may have or respond to questions in the chat, okay? So please use those chat features. So let's get started. And I'm just gonna check again. Everyone understand? Perfect. So if you're raising your hand, just put it in the chat and I'll make sure that I get to your questions. All right, everyone. So I sent all classes before you join me today a quick pre-activity so that you can understand the topic. And one of the questions that I asked was, what does global citizenship mean? What does this concept mean? What does it mean to be a global citizenship? Okay, what does it mean to be a global citizen? And I also sent your teachers pictures that you could look at together so that you could start to talk about global citizenship. So I have the pictures on my screen, and I just want students or teachers to type in the chat, what words or phrases did you think of when you saw these pictures? Okay, so what words or phrases did you think of when you saw the pictures? If you can type them in the chat for me. What words did you think of? Someone said fishing, okay. Kindness, I love it. Hunger, teamwork, I really love that when we're thinking of global citizenship. Planting, culture, someone said. Okay, so I love all of these different words that I'm hearing. And I asked that the students to complete a graphic organizer. So some of the words that I heard, and I'm just gonna type them on our graphic organizer. I heard hunger, also hoping, okay, culture, someone said, I love that word, okay, and they're still coming in the chat. I just wanna see a few others. Thinking of other people, exactly right. These are all words that we may think of when we hear the word global citizenship. And I also added a few of my own words to help us to define global citizenship. So I also said that a global citizen is a person that is aware of and understands the wider world. So some of you said that you were joining me from Abu Dhabi, and I'm very close to you. It's important that you understand and are aware about what's happening, not only here in this region in the UAE, but you understand what's happening in Europe, or understand what's happening in the United States, where I'm from, or in Africa. So you're globally aware. I also said that a global citizen is someone that works with others to make our planet peaceful, fairer, and sustainable. And that may be a new word. Who's ever heard of the word sustainable? You can raise your hand by using a reaction, or you can put what you think it means in the chat. But sustainable means that we're able to maintain. So maintain our current resources, or maintain the things that you currently have in your community. So we're able to sustain them, okay? So that's one of the aspects of being a global citizen. And then I lastly said that a global citizen is a person that takes an active role in their community. So your community could be your community at school, your community could be at home, but also it could be your wider community that you live in. So someone said they were joining me from Portugal. So thinking about your community and how you take an active role in your community, okay? So this helps us to think about the importance of global citizenship. And as we start to think about global citizenship, I'm also going to talk about a few vocabulary words to help us to understand how to become responsible and how to help those around us. So we've already looked at global citizen. We're also going to talk about what does it mean to be global, to think outside of just the area that we live in and think globally about the full planet. And then how do we use natural resources, and what are our natural resources? We'll also talk about poverty today. So this is going to be one of the global issues that I want to talk to you about. And we're going to talk about what is a drought? What is a drought and how does that impact us? And then we're also going to talk about viruses. So this is kind of some of the key words that help us to look at a problem that is facing our planet today. So we talked about helping others. What does it mean to be a global citizen? Let's look at our lesson for today. So our lesson is called Food for Thought, and I love this. So in the chat, if you can just tell me, what do you think about when you hear the title Food for Thought? What words come to your mind? Okay? What words come to your mind when you hear the words food for thought? Hunger, food. Okay, I love it. A lot of people putting sharing food. I love it. And let's look at our big question to examine the title a little bit deeper. So how can we feed the growing planet? So our planet is continuing to grow. Every day our planet is growing. And we have to think about, as global citizens, how are we going to still be able to feed a continuously growing planet? How will we be able to do it? And I want you to think about a few things. So I want you to think about 5 foods that you absolutely love. Just in your mind, imagine the 5 foods that you love. And then I want you to reflect, how about if those foods were no longer available? If you could no longer eat it. So if you could no longer have your favorite foods, how would you feel? What would you do? So when I reflect, at least 3 or 4 days a week, I have spinach. Spinach is regularly in my diet. But what if they were no longer able to grow the crops and no longer able to grow spinach? What would I do? And so this goes back to, how can we feed our growing planet? How can we do this? And someone said shawarma. I love shawarma as well. Pizza, water, chocolate. So then just close your eyes and imagine if those foods were gone. And this is kind of that concept of food for thought. What would we do? And Allison's class is saying heartbroken. They would be heartbroken if they didn't have pizza or ice cream or some of the other things that students are typing in the chat. I love it. So how can we feed our growing planet? So I want everyone just take a moment. We're going to watch a quick video clip, and we're going to talk about what is happening in our ever-growing planet. Let's watch the video together.
The global population is increasing each year. In fact, by 2050, it is estimated that there will be 9 billion people on Earth. It is therefore crucial that we will be able to feed this many people, especially those in poverty. One idea is to increase food production. However, this will probably be a problem in the future because of climate change. For example, extreme weather with a lot of rain and high winds can kill animals and crops. Extreme droughts where no rain falls negatively impacts both crops and animals. And in times of drought, there are also sometimes wildfires which cause massive destruction to farms. A practical way to solve a possible food shortage issue is to reduce food waste. About 1/3 of all food produced today is wasted between the farm where it is grown and the home where it is eaten.
Okay, so let's think about that. When we think about food for thought and this growing problem with not being able to feed our growing planet, what were some of the things that you learned from the video? What were some of the things that you learned from the video? So one of the things I heard was that some areas food waste. I see that in the chat. So much food is wasted. Exactly. Don't waste food. And I also heard about environmental issues. What were some of the environmental issues that you heard from the video? Very good. I see a lot of people, water, problems with no water, climate change. Exactly right. And most of you are typing about the food being wasted. And I'm going to check to see if you can remember from, let's keep going. Let's see if you can remember from the video. Because when I watched the video, I couldn't believe the number. It said from the farms where we grow food, and then also in your household or when you're eating at school, this number of food that's being wasted. So who can remember, if you can type in the chat, what was the percentage Oops, I may have given the answer away a little bit, but how much food is produced is wasted? How much of the food that is produced today is wasted? Who remembers from the video? Okay, you guys are so smart. A lot of you are saying about 1/3, and you're exactly right. So think of how much that food that is that we're actually wasting. So we talked about there's some issues with this growing hunger problem. One, food is wasted, but we also learned some other cause and effect relationships. We learned that millions of people live in poverty. So without poverty means without enough money or basic needs such as food. So this is a cause, and the effect of this, without the money or food, people experience hunger in our world. So that's a global issue. And then the effect of that could be that without proper food or nutrition, that sometimes people, they can become sick, okay? And then another cause and effect relationship that we saw from the video and that our special guest is also going to talk about is that we have millions of people living in regions where there's a lack of environmental. So the environmental lacks some of the natural resources. So if you look at this picture, so it lacks some natural resources, which again, we cannot grow and harvest our food. People lack some of the basic nutrition. So if you look really quickly at this graph, just look at the numbers here. And so remember, we're thinking globally outside of where we live, and look at the numbers here that you see on my graph. And let's just look at some of the captions here. And this is about child malnutrition, meaning that there's some places where people don't have the necessary food or the resources, okay? And if you look at the graph, where are these numbers high? You can just see here where the numbers very high here. What areas of the world? There's some specific areas of the world that are greatly impacted. Asia, thank you. Africa, exactly right. And so you see all over the world, we have people that are living in hunger. So this is why this is called a global crisis. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to turn it over to my special guest, because my special guest is going to share his research and talk about how hunger is impacting our world globally, but also talk about the research that he does in Nairobi. So I'm currently in Dubai, and he's joining me from Nairobi, but I'm also happy that we're all interconnected. And that's why this is such a special guest and a great thing to talk about. So please welcome me and welcome in our National Geographic Explorer, Alberto Burgess. And Alberto, one of the great facts that I want you to know about him, and when we talk about how can we help, he started his research when he was only 15 years old. And he started research and experiments and his projects looking at some of the issues that he's going to discuss with us today. So hi, Alberto.
Hi, DaVida, and thank you so much to everyone who's joining in. As you mentioned, I'm in Nairobi. Maybe you can go to the next slide. And so if you look at the black map, I'm here in Kenya. And the area I'll be focusing on today is in the northern part of the country, which is highlighted in blue in the lighter part. So just after high school, I began enjoying reading books about early explorers who were coming to Kenya back in the 1800s. And something that was very striking to me was that they talked about the northern part of the country to be a place that was having lots of wild animals. And here you can see in these images, they were actually being chased by elephants and being attacked by lions. So next slide. So I decided to find out what this area looks like. So I plotted a journey to Chalbit Desert. Next slide. And during that time, I didn't have my own vehicle, so I had to hitchhike on the government official Land Rovers. So this was me at age 17 during my first journey to northern Kenya. So the area in particular is Marsabit. And so this was an area that I was really curious to know how it looked like. Was it the same? Was it having the same situation like the way I used to read about it in the books? So a journey from Nairobi, which is where I am, to Marsabit usually takes about 9 hours. So by the time you're arriving in the night, it's usually dark. But the next morning, I was surprised to see a forest around me. And I couldn't understand how this could happen because I was supposed to be going into Chalbi Desert. But here I am in a place called Mount Marsabit, and I'm surrounded by all this wonderful greenery. Next slide. And at the very top of this mountain lies a very beautiful crater lake known as Lake Paradise. So as you can see, it's a wonderful green place where lots of animals come and the people get their water from this area. Next slide. And as we began going away from the mountain, we began to realize that it's not just green everywhere. It actually starts getting drier. And you can see this as you head further away from the mountain. So it does get to a point where all we could see was this lava flow and these huge rocks. And in fact, this picture is very interesting because the place is called Marsabit. And when you look at this place, it actually looks like a bit of Mars. So, except it's not red as it is with the planet Mars. So in this particular day, we were driving through the desert and we came across this area. And I remember my dad telling me about these black rocks. He told me that if you get one of these black rocks and if you're lucky and you break it in half, on the inside, you'll find very beautiful crystals, usually white or blue. So I was very curious. So I asked the driver of the vehicle to stop. And so he stopped and we all jumped out. Some people were pressed, others wanted to stretch their legs because it's a very long journey. So I decided to take this photograph and I was gonna take one of the rocks you see here with me. So before I did that, I decided, why not let me take a photo of the rock itself? And as I was going to click the shutter button for the camera, something darted in and out of the lens. And I was surprised, what could that be? And one of my friends who was behind me jumped back into the truck. And behold, I'd taken a photograph of a creature that had never been photographed before. And in fact, it was unknown to science at the time. So I want you to take a closer look at this image. How many legs do you count? Some say this is a spider, so it should have 8 legs. And here we are seeing, I can see someone said 5 on one side, so that's 10 on the other side. But we all know that spiders are supposed to have 8 legs. So this is very strange. What this is, in fact, is known as a camel spider. So those in the deserts who live in the deserts, such in the Middle East, may have seen some of this if you go on a desert safari. But actually, they do have 8 legs, but the front pair are their hands, which they use to grab flying insects, and they use that as their food. So we call them in scientific terms pedipalps. So beyond that area, it gets even drier to the point where we get to the actual area that's known as Chalbi Desert. And you can see there is no green plants anywhere for miles and miles and miles. So one may begin to wonder is, do there any people who live here? Are there animals that live in this area? Next slide. And in fact, they are. Here you find indigenous communities of northern Kenya. These are the Gabra tribe. They create these interesting home structures. They may look simple, but they are very well designed to cope with the heat. And when you enter into one of these huts, it's very cool inside there. And next slide. And so we also have animals such as ostriches that roam across the desert. But you may begin to wonder, where do they get their food from? Next slide. And so for the people have camels, and the camels are used to transport the water that they go in search for, to transport items that they may use during their stays in the desert. And in some cases, people also consume camels. It's a form of food product in itself. So you get, they serve multiple purposes. Next slide. And then you have some people who also keep donkeys. So donkeys are used primarily to carry water. And you can see in this photo, the 3 donkeys there are carrying jerry cans of water that they're going to search for. And you can also tell how dry it is during this time of the year. Next slide. And so eventually, when people walk for probably about 25 kilometers to 30 kilometers, maybe about 18 miles, they get to this oasis. So the oases are the places in the deserts where you get water. And so the animals come, they quench their thirst. And generally, it's usually green, as you can see, as compared to the other photos. And so people enjoy bringing the animals here for, and also the people themselves get water. But there are times of the year when this very water also begins to dry up. And you can see in one of the newspaper articles 3 years ago, about three and a half years ago, was that the Red Cross was looking for donations from people in the city, so Kenyans like ourselves and other well-wishers, to help donate items and also water for the people in the countryside. And here you can see in this image, there's a man who is actually having to bend down to drink straight from the dry riverbed because water is very hard to find. And eventually what happens is that it gets to some point where it's so dry that people like this man in this image was trekking about 40 kilometers on that morning to look for the areas that would find, where he could find water. And then he'd be able to tell his other communities, oh, I found water at this point, bring the camels, bring the donkeys. And if he doesn't find water there, he has to walk even further. So luckily for him on that day, we were driving on this road. It's actually the desert plains. And he saw us, he flagged us, asked us to give him a lift so that he can get to the next point to look for water. And unfortunately for some animals, if they don't make it, they unfortunately have to die. And you can see some of their remains on the desert floor. But this got me thinking, how comes this area is experiencing drought, yet 120 years ago, I was reading about areas that people were being chased by elephants and lions. What happened to all those creatures? So to answer that question, we have to go back to the mountain. And when we go back to the mountain, we find that the mountain is actually being deforested. That means that people are cutting down trees, like you can see here, to get fuel, to get other forms of timber products, and that is causing water shortages. So I brought my community together, the Explorers Club of Kenya. We are a young team. We're now 6 years old, the organization, but we are comprised of young people and elderly people, and we all come together to join one cause. So we thought, what is it that we can do to help the situation? So we began going in our 4x4s and carrying loads of equipment and items for people in the north. And we generally go on this, we call them expeditions, so long trips into the desert. And the first thing we do when we get there is we talk to the people. We ask them, what are some of the challenges you're facing? How is it that we, the Explorers Club of Kenya, can help you? And what are those things that we may help you with? Next slide. And so oftentimes people will say, we would like to know what we can do about the situation. So the Explorers Club of Kenya decides that in order for us to help you, it's good for everyone to be on the same level. So one of the things we always aim to do is to do education activities. So we take out students, like you can see in this photo. Next slide. And we go do outdoor activities. So you can see people went out and they take observations of what they are able to see, what they touch, what they feel, what they hear. And when it's safe to do, we taste some of the wild fruits that are found in their environment. And we do what's known as a BioBlitz. So it's a very fun activity that you should one day try and participate in. And the idea is to get everyone to feel connected with nature. And in other times, we get bigger groups out. So like in this particular day, we had even the forest rangers, we had students, we had community members all come out together. And our main goal was, next slide, to plant trees. So the idea is if we are able to plant trees, then we're able to especially in the mountain, then we're able to draw in moisture from the clouds. As you can see in this photo, it's very cloudy on that day. So trees help us bring moisture, and moisture gets into the ground, and later on, it finds its way into the desert as an oasis. So we also have young babies who come out to help us with their moms, and they come to help plant trees. Next slide. And at some times of the year when it's drier, we give out what are known as seed balls. Maybe you could just go back to that slide. So the seed balls are actually tree seeds that are covered in charcoal dust, like you can see at the top of the image. And what that is, the charcoal dust is food for the trees. So when the trees start germinating, when it rains, they get this nutrition from the charcoal, and that helps boost their survival, it helps the trees grow faster. And so everyone who participates in our events gets bags full of seeds. And like on this day, we distributed more than 60,000 tree seeds. So that is going to help regreen the mountains, going to help us get more moisture into the landscape. And then eventually, because sometimes, in fact, most times of the year, it's going to be drier. So we also give the communities free water tanks. So the water tanks help them to harvest water when the day it's going to rain. And they also use that water to feed the animals, to water the trees that they've planted, and also for them to quench their thirst. Next slide. And so eventually what we aim to do, David, if you could go back to the previous slide. All right, there we go. So eventually what we are aiming to do is when we plant trees, one, trees are food for wild animals, trees are food for their livestock that people keep, and also trees produce fruits that people eat. So we're helping address the issue of hunger. And we're also addressing the issue of poverty, because when you have trees, you don't just get food from it, you also get what are known as non-timber products. So you can get wax out of it, you can get bees to come and forage. And if you have a beehive, you get honey out of it. So honey is also food for people, but you can also sell the honey, and that will get you money to buy other things that you can't get there. But the bigger picture is actually to get us water. So by planting trees, we absorb moisture from the air, and that moisture then goes down into the soil, and from there it starts making its way into the deserts where people in the deserts can access water. Next slide. Because actually in the desert, as you can see here, it's very hard to plant trees. If we plant trees, then they don't survive because it's very hot and it's very dry. So what we aim to do is, and what we always do is, we'll plant trees in the mountain, which is far away. Then within months, water is going to start trickling its way back to the oases. But when we are traveling through the desert, we always stop to where communities are, and we help give them water, which helps quench their thirst, and it also helps them get by. So, and once in a while, we all love sweet things. So I love chocolate. And in this particular day, I came with box loads of chocolates and biscuits and juices to give the children, because why not? Let's all celebrate sometimes by having sweet things in life. So with that short presentation, I'd like to thank everyone. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll answer.
Thank you so much, Alberto. It's just interesting to hear about, different regions and just how the drought affects, the water, not only the water system, but as well as food shortage. And so it all comes together. There are some questions in the Q&A, and I know we're running right on time at the end of our presentation, but some are asking about, where does food waste go? That was one of the things that we shared. And how can classes organize to help with some of these initiatives? So maybe if you can answer those two questions first.
All right, those are great questions. So what's interesting is actually in a country like Kenya, where people have less access to food, we don't see much food waste, especially in the countryside. If there's any food waste, which is very little at that point, it gets to go into the environment as composting. And if you're interested in helping out with our projects and maybe joining us at some point in the future, you can always reach out to me. I will type in our address, website, so that you're able to see how you can get in touch with us. It's www.
That'll be great. Thank you, Alberto. And I do want to apologize to some students because some of you had great questions. I was looking in the chat, but unfortunately I had to turn off the chat. We had to turn off the chat because some people were just not really on task. So if we have questions that you would like to put in the Q&A, we can put them in the Q&A because we want to make sure that this is an enjoyable experience for everyone, okay? So thank you for Alberto for putting some information on how students can help or how classes can participate with the Explorers Club. And that kind of brings us to the end. I know we're over time, but let's just go back to our big question of how can we feed the growing planet? And what I will do, the remaining of the questions, I will take them and then I will populate a Q&A so that all of the questions can be answered and we can send them to all teachers and teachers can share them with their classes. We will also share the resources so that you can go over some of the reading materials and some of the videos with your students at a later date so that you can finish the unit. But we wanted just to bring you with some of those problems, which Alberto shared through his research about how poverty, about how the lack of natural resources, droughts, environmental resources, and food waste, how they all impact this global issue of hunger and this food crisis we're having. So what we want students to do is we're going to share some information with you and share some solutions that we have in some of our reading materials about what people are doing around the world to help impact and make change, how people can grow in sustainable gardens, how they can do different things in food banks, how we can all take action. And one of the things that I would like for students to do is each class to participate in some type of global project, okay? So a global citizen project where students will complete a project, submit it to National Geographic, and we will give prizes for some of the top projects and submit them on our website. So thank you guys for participating. I hope that you learned a little bit about how you can become a global citizen. For teachers, we will send the resources and the materials to you. We're using our Reach Higher series for this lesson, and some of the text that you saw and some of the story and some of the articles that you saw are from our Reach Higher materials. We'll send that to you so that you can complete the rest of the lesson with your class. And then please join us next week so that you can learn more strategies that you can do with your students to make sure that they're becoming global citizens and how they can use content to enrich their literacy. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm sorry that we are running out of time. It was great. We will take all of the questions that we have, and we will make sure that we get the answers back to you. And thank you again. There are loads of questions coming in the Q&A. So as we're ending, I think I'll take one more. Why don't people in the desert go to the forest? So why don't they go to the forest quicker, Alberto? If you can answer that question. And then classes that need to leave, thank you for joining us, and we will see you the next session.
That's a great question as well. So at times during the very dry areas, during very dry periods, people walk with their animals to the forest. But you can imagine the forest is only a small portion of the landscape. So the forest actually gets so much pressure that the government decides that people should keep away from the forest, and people should try and access water in different parts of the landscape where possible. So sometimes that could be a bit problematic, but
I think we lost
more trees in the mountain, then once dried up, we get water eventually.
Thank you, Alberto. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much. Again, we'll take your questions. We'll put them with the information and the materials that we'll share with you so that your students can participate in the final project. And I look forward to reading and watching some of the projects so that we can award winners. Okay, have a wonderful day ahead, students, and thank you for participating and engaging with us today. Bye.